Okay, good morning, everyone. It's good to see a few familiar faces and a few new faces too. This is the first forum of the fall, so welcome back to Forum. And I am Jeff Peckrell. I am the co-chair of the Human Rights Working Group along with Dolores and Melvin. Melvin is not with us today. He's still recuperating, unfortunately. But the three of us, and we have a larger group that helps us to plan these forums. I'm going to, as a part of these announcements at the beginning, tell you about some things that we have coming up in forum and a few other things that are going to be happening around the church in the coming weeks. I'd like to also say that we have a new way of submitting ideas to us. We do occasionally have conversations with people, have suggestions for things, and sometimes they just come up kind of in email or things like that. We have a form has been added to the website. We have a page on the church's website for forum, and there you will find a nice place to enter in your suggestion. It goes into a Google Doc that we will discuss all of those at our monthly meetings that we have. We have our next meeting next Wednesday, by the way. I'd even like to say that if anybody here is interested in getting like a little bit more involved in forum to help us plan these and stuff, please let us know. Come to the meeting. That would be great. Okay, so meetings that we have, I'll just tell you a little bit about the programming we have scheduled for you for the next 2-3 months. We have almost every Sunday scheduled through early December. There's a couple of Sundays that this room isn't available, and we have 2 Sundays that we haven't scheduled anything for in November, but they're kind of low attendance days right around Thanksgiving, so we may not have forum then. But a week from today, Dolores has arranged for Tim Redmond, the editor of 48 Hills, a really great local journalist. He's just a fantastic speaker. You've seen him here before, probably. He's coming to talk to us about the state of the city and a few things around the coming election. So it follows on nicely from the meeting we're going to have today, where Cal Ball will be talking about getting out the vote. 2 weeks from now, on the 22nd, our own Bruce Newberger, who has written an amazing book called Postcards to Hitler, will be doing a session here. It'll be a little different format. He's going to be kind of interviewed by Marty Vanderlaan and talking about that book. And if you haven't had a chance to get the book or would like to read it in advance, you can get it, and that'd make it even better. Then on the 29th, we'll be having kind of a readout from the UUA, which is the annual conference of the Unitarian Universalists. And Dolores will be talking about one of the actions of immediate witness, as these resolutions are called. And I think we have a couple of other people speaking too. So that should be very relevant and important. Then on October 6th, we will be hearing about a book called The Mayor of the Tenderloin, which was reviewed in the Chronicle a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago, I think. And the author of the book is Allison Owings, and she'll be here with the person the book is written about, who is a man named Del Seymour, who has had an interesting life and really had a change in his life for the positive. So it's kind of a hopeful book about this troubled neighborhood that we are so close to right now. Okay, then on October 13th, we have CURB, that's Californians United for Responsible Budgets, will be coming here to talk about prison reform and the problems of the carceral system in California. On the 27th, Richard Hardigan, who is in the audience today, will be coming to speak to us about settler violence in the West Bank. And we hope to have several other presentations over the course of the year relating to this very, very urgent issue in Israel-Palestine. So this is the first one of those. Then on November 10th, Stephen Zunes, professor from USF, will be talking about global politics issues, probably touching on Israel and Palestine as well. And then finally, the last one I'll announce right now, on December 1st, we have a church member, Bob Bacon, will be coming to speak about the death penalty and essentially work to abolish it. A couple of other announcements. This Thursday, 9/12, in this room, we have a really important session being sponsored by Senior and Disability Action and Senior Vote Alliance for Retired Americans. We'll be having a forum here in this room with, and Art, who is sponsoring this, has got flyers for you to learn more about it. We'll have the mayoral candidates and the supervisor candidates for 3 of the supervisory districts right here, talking about questions relevant to people who are disabled and or elderly. So that should be a great meeting. If you're available to come in the middle of the day, please do plan on that. And my final announcement is on Sunday, September 29th, after church, so it'll be after one of our forums, we have We Don't Need No Stinkin' Fascism, Writers' Hopes for Humanity, a literary festival with food, readings, theater, and music. And this is a project of Bruce. So if you want to know more about it, well, this flyer will be on the table back there, but you can also speak to Bruce. Finally, I'd like to mention that this is the first church Sunday of the fall, and there's an annual kind of a ritual in Unitarianism called the Ingathering of the Waters. Have people heard of that? So I and a number of other people are doing a kind of a silent vigil, incorporating it into this, which is bringing an empty cup to symbolize the deprivation of water of people in Gaza and the intentional destruction of the water systems there. So I will be taking this cup to the front of the church. It says an empty cup, and it has a watermelon on the back. I'm not sure if you know this, but because the Palestinian flag is being banned in Israel and Palestine in the occupied territories, people have taken to the watermelon because it has the same colors as the flag. So this is my symbolic statement of concern and protest as a part of the ingathering of the water ceremony coming up in the church this morning. And if you have a chance to do that too, I think it would be great. This is going on in churches across the country. It's an organized action. Yes, Richard. Well, I just made this myself this morning, but you could get a paper cup and just write something on it. No. I will be having these for sale. Not. It's during the church service, right? The ingathering of the waters is I've only seen it a few times myself, but people are invited to come to the front of the church with a bit of water from that symbolizes some kind of meaningful experience that they had over the summer or the course of the year, a place they went, something like that. And yeah. All right, so I think that's it for announcements. There's one final thing. It's a sort of a procedural thing, which is that just our statement of decorum for the forum. We're all, it's a free and open space, but we just want to be respectful for if we have questions and comments. And with that, I will ask Dolores to come to the front and do our Ohlone land recognition.
Thank you. We, the members of the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco, acknowledge the Ramaytush Ohlone people who are the ancestral custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Ramaytush Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, the land that our society rests upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We recognize that as the original stewards of this land, the Ohlone and other indigenous peoples have understood the interconnectedness of all life and maintained harmony with all of nature for millennia. We honor and thank them now for their enduring commitment to our Mother Earth. And now I want to introduce our own Cal Ball. Cal, you want to come up? And he's a favorite around here, especially at this time of elections. And Cal has worked as a professional musician, technology executive, and now as an activist advocating for the voting rights of people within marginalized and underserved communities. Let's welcome him again. Thank you.
I'm Cal Ball. I joined the church in 2020. I joined because I was, in the words of Network, mad as hell and not going to take it anymore, having lived, the previous 4 years. And I had heard through my very best sister and friend, Mari Magaloni, that all about the Unitarian Church and its ability to train, and that they act out their faith in activism. And so that's how I started. And that's how I started into this work. So I won't go too much more into that because I want to be respectful of time. This election is going to reverberate for 2 generations. What do I mean? It occurred to me that while Biden was running, and that was a tough time, we all felt the anxiety of that. But it had occurred to me a few weeks ago that, wait a minute, this isn't actually about Biden or Trump. It is, of course, but or necessarily about Trump and Harris. Yes, it's very important. What occurred to me is more important is the impact that this election is going to have on the future of the Supreme Court, which is affecting our lives today in ways that are going to persist for years to come. So I picked out 3 cases that occurred to me that are having the most impact on degrading our democracy and our voting rights. First being Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, reversed a century-old campaign finance restrictions and enabled corporations and other outside groups to spend unlimited funds on elections, oftentimes anonymously. So as if there wasn't enough influence peddling going on within our government, the Supreme Court decided, by the way, this was quite the majority of the Supreme Court, decided to further lift restrictions. The reasoning, and it's hard for me to use that word when it comes to this case, but the reasoning behind this was that, one, money is speech and therefore should be protected under the First Amendment, and that corporations are people. The exact verbiage was they are associations of people. First of all, money is not speech. Let's be very clear about that. Money is a microphone and it's an amplifier. That's what money is. It's not speech. Secondly, corporations are not people. They're not even associations of people. Having worked for major corporations, I can tell you, you walk into the building under a mandate from somebody who is your boss. This is not an association. It's not a party. It's a job. And when these donations are made by these corporations, that entire employee base is not consulted. It's not as if you have the opportunity to say, well, I don't want you to donate to those folks. So these decisions to overwhelm our politics with money are made at the C-suite level at these corporations. And by the way, if you really defined a corporation as a person, then that person would be by design, it's not a joke, sociopathic, right? Because they only exist to return value to their owners at the lowest cost possible. And they will absolutely do so by pushing the envelope of risk. You can see that in the fossil fuel industry. You can take Boeing, for example, right? Another humdinger here, Shelby v. Holder. This one written by who I now refer to as John, I just call balls and strikes, Roberts. All right. This decision struck down Section 4B of the Voting Rights Act. Well, it's only the most important provision in the Voting Rights Act because it is what established the pre-clearance doctrine. So for 11 or so certain states, there was a formula in the Voting Rights Act that said these states have shown a pattern of discrimination. And therefore, we want a federal mandate to say, if you are going to make changes, substantial changes to your voting laws, we want the opportunity to review that and potentially block that. Because the evidence and pattern of discrimination in these states has been dramatic. Let's put it that way. The holding here was, and the reasoning, again, tough to use that word, is that 4B was no longer necessary. The United States has changed and it evolved, and it was no longer necessary to, impose pre-clearance on these states. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this and the impact of this decision in a second here, but just keep that in mind. And last, the cherry on top here is that the Supreme Court has decided that the rule of law only goes so far in this country. And that not everyone is going to be subject to the same rule of law that everyone else is. And in this case, they granted to the most powerful office on earth fairly spacious immunity for any prosecution, from any prosecution that would be deemed taken as an official act. In this case, overturning the United States government and a free and fair election. So let's go back to Holby for a minute. This is the pre-clearance clause. 10 years after Shelby versus Holder, 29 states have added 94 restrictive laws. 11 states that were subject to pre-clearance passed 29 of these restrictive laws. So what do we mean when we say that? Well, very difficult voter ID requirements. We'll say a few more words about that. Shortening timelines to voting. Restrict mail-in voting. Removal of drop boxes. I actually did this in Atlanta, right? Removed a bunch of drop boxes. Make it more difficult to vote, force people into long lines at polling stations. Well, guess who lives in metropolitan Atlanta? That's right. Black folks live in metropolitan Atlanta. Reduce the number of polling places. This creates long lines. In Georgia, by the way, you can't give somebody a bottle of water or food that is waiting in a line. It's against the law. Purging of voter rolls. This is a favorite one. I love this story. When I was working in the 2020 election, what was his name? Frank, I'm going to forget his last name. Frank DeRosa. He's a Secretary of State in the state of Ohio. He actually did something pretty remarkable. They went through a voter purge, and Frank said, okay, I'm going to publish the names of the folks that were purged and make it publicly available so that people can look, and if we made a mistake, you'll let us know. Well, one of the names that got purged was the president of the League of Women Voters. Expanding cutoffs for voter registration. If you can't register, you can't vote. It's a lot of words up here. I'm not going to torture you with all these words, except to just give you a flavor of what do we mean by voter ID restrictions. The most strict, as the word would imply here, strict photo ID required for in-person. So that's state driver's license or a state ID. You don't have one of those, you're not voting in one of these states. Strict non-photo ID, again, driver's license, state ID card is fine. Other forms are accepted, say like a utility bill. There's a problem. Poor folks have a hard time getting a utility bill with their name on it. Why? Because they move a lot. Poor folks live together a lot. And their name may not be on that utility bill. They may rent, and they never see a utility bill. And believe me, the folks who are writing these laws, they know this. You could see the other two here, non-strict voter ID. Some states, including Deep South, they're still going to require a photo ID, but they'll take some other forms. Some cases like your student ID from college. Once again, who gets impacted here? Yeah, people of color. $34.5 million people in this country do not have an unexpired photo ID. That is 15% of the voting population. Voter IDs are constantly changing. This is by design. They do the same thing, by the way, in polling places. They'll change the polling place a month before the election. So some place that you had been voting for years is now no longer there. Since 2022, 18 states have added voter ID laws. Since 2012, over 52 million people now live in states with voter ID laws. So why? Why is all of this incredible energy and force and work being done to pass all of these laws? The argument is this, is that if you're a US citizen, you get to vote. If you're not a US citizen, you shouldn't vote. I don't particularly have an issue personally with that argument. but it's completely and utterly disingenuous. Between 2003 and 2023, the Heritage Foundation, these are the folks behind 2025 Plan 2025, conservative, found 24 instances of non-citizen voting. Okay. Now, there's folks in this room that are a heck of a lot better at math than I am, but even I can figure out that this is what statisticians refer to as statistically insignificant. Okay. In 2016, the Brennan Center reviewed 23.5 million votes cast within 42 jurisdictions and found exactly 30 instances of non-citizen voting. By the way, more than half of these never see a criminal charge because they were mistakes, and they were honest mistakes. It's actually kind of encouraging. This is how good our election processes are. These all got caught. So what are we going to do? What can be done? Well, first of all, we have to win elections. When we do, we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. It restores 4B. It restores that notion of clearance. Enact automatic voter registration. We have it here in California. Works beautifully. Add more polling places. Put them back. Okay? So we don't have people standing in line 3 and 4 hours. Now we get into my two dream sequences here, which is that state legislatures and the people actually get motivated, vote down ballot, and pay attention to who they're voting for in their state legislature. They start to dismantle gerrymandering, one of the most undemocratic processes or systems out there in the country today. And then near and dear to my heart is finally overturn Citizens United. But what's the most important thing that can be done? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Most important thing that can be done is vote. It counts. Heard an interesting article on the way in today. When you don't vote, you're still getting counted. And it's really interesting. I had never thought about that. But folks know when you don't vote. And what do? They ignore you. They will do nothing for you. And that's whole groups that got identified. These are the people I work with, are low propensity voters. That's why they get marginalized. Volunteer. This church is something else. In 2022, this congregation wrote 6,100 letters to marginalized communities and underserved communities in battleground states. So far this summer, with half the congregation gone, we've already written over 3,000 letters. Yeah, it's good. So volunteer. Some of us are going to go to Arizona. We're going to knock on doors. Possibly the most effective thing you can do in an election is knock on people's doors, look at them face to face. If you can't do any of those things, or they're not mutually exclusive, please donate as generously as you can. These things are expensive. You'll see that we have a goal to write 10,000 letters. Well, stamps are 72 cents. Once again, the math is pretty simple. We got $7,200 just in postage. Several of us, I hope it's several, are going to be going to Arizona. Well, there's expenses to that. We got to pay for our travel. We have to try and offset lodging. UU the Vote is going to help with that. But if you can donate, please do. So let's talk a little bit about UU the Vote. How many people have heard of UU the Vote? Okay, we got most everybody. UU the Vote is a national denominational organization. It sits under the umbrella of our social justice campaign, which is referred to as Side with Love. Side with Love has 4 areas that they concentrate on, initiatives. One is climate justice, criminal justice reform, LGBTQ rights and protections, and UU the Vote, which is focused on democracy. Our faith calls us towards building democratic processes. It's in our bylaws, it's in our principles, it's now in our values. And we do this within our congregations and our communities. It doesn't happen at the national level. It happens right here. And it is happening right here. Committed to growth and transformation through community and local action, coupled with political education and skill development. I'll say a couple of words about that in a minute. Our work is prophetic and not partisan. It is to advance our commitment to our politic and values that centers community and power building. This is the big one, power building, becoming a force multiplier. Keep an eye on my time here. You want my face ID. All right. Let's see. All right. Good. So now what does that look like? Those are fancy and, they're fancy words and sound a bit grandiose, but I can assure you that this manifests itself in very real ways. This year, we are committed to gathering up 10,000 volunteers, contacting 3 million voters in battleground states, having 500 congregations engaged, and 8 weeks of sustained public activity. You're seeing that here. That's what's happening when you walk by that UU the vote table. It's our local mobilization. And we are reaching out from California into these battleground states. This one's hard to grok or completely accept because it's so much work. But this is long haul work. We just said that this vote's going to reverberate for generations. Alito, I may get this backwards, is 74 years old. Thomas is 76. These guys could be on the court for another 10 years easily. That means we have to make the right choices in our elections this cycle, the next cycle, and the next one after that. Long haul work. And it starts, and you're going to see this as a theme, it starts locally. Local election protection. How many people have been a poll worker? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. I've done it twice now. If you have not worked the polls, I would highly encourage you to do that. You will get a perspective on how the elections are run in this country that I know I never had. And by the way, if you learn how to commit fraud in one of our elections, let me know. In-person mobilizations. This is where we are going to gather up a few of us. We're going to go to Arizona. We got Ralph, we got Mari, and I'm hoping some other folks. We're going to go knock on doors. Building skills. This is this long haul work. So tending soil was I almost call it a symposium. It lasted for 6 months. It was a training that a couple of us went through to really build organizing skills. UUTV skill ups is something that I had the pleasure to participate in, which are they pick one subject and we have a webinar for about an hour. And we put on, I think there may be as many as 12 to 15 skill ups. Give you an example. Asset mapping, fancy word. It really means, do you understand what you have at the church in terms of assets? And do you have a framework to deploy those assets in support of your values? And in some cases, quickly, when the community needs it. It's a great skill up. Local mobilization. This is where we're going to be present. As I said, some of us are going to Arizona. I'm not going to name these states, but very active. UU the vote is very active. Voter contact, poll worker recruitment, election defense, and local issue campaigns. Local issue campaign, for instance, in Arizona, there is an amendment, constitutional amendment on the ballot to secure abortion rights for women in Arizona. Our partner there that we are partnering with as we go knock doors is Arizona for Abortion Rights, or abortion access, excuse me. We do this by building these partnerships, right? I mentioned force multiplier. Starts here, and then we get together with Kensington, who is also going to be going to Arizona. We get together with First UU Portland. They are also coming to Arizona. We then engage in state action with state action networks. So these are aggregations of congregations within a state action network that really make this stuff happen. You can see how it builds out. Partnerships, incredibly important. All our letters are done through a partnership with Vote Forward, fantastic organization. Reclaim Our Vote focuses on phone banks. Power to the Polls focuses on recruiting folks to be poll workers in these key states. Those are just a few of the partners. Other tremendous partners I've had the pleasure to work with are the ACLU, League of Women Voters. Some cases there was a college network that we got together with, which was fantastic. So you had students on phone banking. So let's wrap up around you the vote, and then we'll talk about what we're doing right here in this congregation. So we went on issues. I mentioned the ballot initiative, or amendment rather, in Arizona regarding abortion access. Stop Cop City. This is a facility being built in Atlanta to train policemen as warriors, as opposed to training them to be guardians. Support voters in voting, election defense, poll worker recruitment. We've talked about that. We talked about our field plan. We're going to go knock on doors. The vote on the road. Good trouble congregations, developing skills and leadership, direct voter contact via letter writing, and phone banks. Phone banks, remember that. We're going to come back to that. All right. Trainings and political education. Letter writing, I already told you that we've already written 3,000 plus letters, which is fantastic. Our goal is 10,000. The letters are available every Sunday at that table. Also, beginning this Sunday, we'll have a set of letters and envelopes at the front desk. So if you can't make it in on a Sunday, but you can make it in on a Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever that is, please come on in. We can provide you letters, and you can return letters that you've already written. Phone banks. It's amazing to me that I think I've had more folks express interest in getting on an airplane to go to Arizona to face voters face to face than I can get people to phone bank. And I get it, actually. It can be, I was terrified the first time I did it. As a matter of fact, I get hold of this. We're calling into Collins County, Texas, of all things. And I get this woman on the phone. And we have a nice conversation. It's okay. I'd say, hey, I'm volunteer, nonpartisan. Just want to make sure you know where, are you registered? Can you vote? Or where are you going to vote? Do you have a plan to vote? And she said, where are you from? I go, well, I'm calling you from California. Oh, my Lord. Y'all are just ruining my state. You just had Californians move in next door with their fancy wines and cheeses. I'm not kidding. I did not make that up. Thank you. Other conversations that I've had, though, more seriously on phone banking. I remember calling into Georgia in what's called the Black Belt region. And this is not about race. It's actually about the color of the soil. It's very fertile soil down in the south of Georgia, and the belt stretches all the way up into South Carolina. I get this lovely woman on the phone. She says, how can I help you? And I give her the spiel. And she's very patient, doesn't interrupt. And I said, so that's it. Do you have any questions, ma'am? She goes, oh, honey, we got this. Made my heart sing. And then the most important one that you can have is that you get somebody on the phone and said, well, are you registered? Well, I think so. Well, do you mind if I check? No. Well, it doesn't see you're registered here. Oh, my goodness. Did you vote in the last election? Well, no, I missed that one. Okay, they purged you off the rolls. Let me tell you how to register. And that phone call ends with, all right, I'm going to do that right now, or I'm going to do it tomorrow. And I promise you, I'm going to vote. That's the conversation. When I first got into this work, a dear friend, Reverend Kathy Ryan Starr, said to all of us, a honeybee, some of y'all have heard this one, a honeybee produces 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in its lifetime, its entire lifetime, 1/12 of a teaspoon. Yet millions of honeybees, you get gallons. When you have a phone call like that one, or you've helped somebody to register to vote, you just made yourself a little honey. Incredibly moving and important. The most impactful thing we can do to affect an election, influence folks, is look at them in the eye. Be with them personally. That's why canvassing is so popular. Both campaigns on both sides have people out knocking doors. We knock doors a little differently. We are nonpartisan. We've got door hangers, but all we want to do is just make sure you know where you're going to vote and that you have a plan to vote. And then, oh, by the way, we stick around on election day and we fan out to those polling places. And we make sure everything's going to be is safe and okay. We're going October 25th through November 5th. You can see we've had some folks express interest. If you are interested in going, you certainly don't have to go the entire time. We're asking for folks to come and canvass for 5 days, whichever 5 days you want to. If you're interested, come and see me and I'll get you more details. Thank you. Yeah, just one thing. Yeah, we've got a party next week right here in this room. So please come and bring all your friends. We're going to write some letters together, and it's a really fun thing to do. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So far, one kind of announcement or comment and one question. So the question, well, I'll do the announcement first so you can talk longer about the question. Okay. There is a voter canvassing that is partisan, however, near home, Central Valley, every weekend through November 2nd. Ask Cheryl McKinney. That's Cheryl there. Anybody interested in doing that, talk to her. Okay. And then here's a question. So the 2020 election was the first in which, in a long time, in which more people voted for the winner than did not vote. What did you think is the biggest reason for that? I hadn't heard this myself.
I hadn't heard that stat. That's a wonderful stat. I'll look that one up. I think the question goes to voter engagement. And enthusiasm. Quite frankly, since 2016, there are elections. In fact, this is the first election we're facing right now that actually has an element of joy and hope in it, right? Because the ones from 2016 on have been based on terror and repugnance. And it's just been awful. And my heart sang when I saw that 10,000 watt smile on one of the candidates' faces. I am not going to mention which one. At a recent convention. This is going to be the first election that I think we have maybe an equal mix of terror and an equal mix of hope and joy. So I don't know if that answers the question. That's my best answer, is that you got a bunch of people out that just couldn't imagine the alternative, and yet they got the alternative. Okay. I think.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, we got more.
Okay, regarding the US Constitution and voting, do you agree that the Electoral College, which many think is unfair, what can be done about changing that? Example, California versus Montana representation. All right. The small states are unfairly weighted in favor the elections towards them.
The Electoral College is a product of systemic racism. There's just no other way to put it. You are not going to capture the southern states' signatures on the United States Constitution unless you invented this system of the Electoral College, giving them a much more powerful voice than otherwise you would naturally see occurring based on population. What to be done about it? That would involve a constitutional convention. And there's some good arguments on both sides of why you should or should not do that. Opening a constitutional convention is very much like opening Pandora's box. There is a fascinating initiative, and I should have written this down. Maybe y'all can help me with this one. It's a set of states that are agreeing to sign on to say, whoever wins the popular vote in the presidential election, we're going to cast our electors in that direction versus for the, underneath the electoral college system. That is fascinating. There's over 15 states, 20 states that have signed on to this so far. The key there is to get enough states to sign on that represent 270 electoral college votes, which is the threshold for being named president. So that's a really interesting one. That's something that's actually doable. Okay.
Okay, so we have a couple questions about electoral policy and a couple more about the process of the vote. First, let's do the process one. So how are people selected to contact by letter or canvassing? How do they come up with those lists?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is where good old political science does come in. The names of the people that we contact, the doors that we knock, are all coming from voter registration rolls. By analyzing the voter registration rolls, we can identify zip codes. We can also identify voting patterns. Those are the two criteria that we're looking at. Is this a low propensity voter? And are they in the zip code that we want to go talk to folks in? I will tell you, I canvassed in Savannah during the midterms, and the idea was to go and talk to folks in the Black community. The targeting was so good that I spoke to one white person, just one. And this is across various economic strata. So at least three major economic strata, upper middle class, lower income, and then folks just living in absolute poverty, which will break your heart. But fantastic conversations. I did not have one weird, sketchy conversation with anybody or experience. So I hope that answers the question. Same thing goes with letter writing. Same science is getting applied and filters are getting applied.
What's the due date for completing the letters? And by the way, when do they mail them out? Do they save them all towards the end or?
Yeah, another good question. The science, this one I scratch my head on, but the science that Vote Forward has is that they want to mail them on October 28th. That makes me nervous. I just think that's a little too late. So our goal is to have all our letters back by October 13th. It is a non-trivial effort to take thousands of letters and check that they're stamped and organize them and all of that. Liz did the duty of taking 6,100 letters at the post office. That's a great story. You should hear it. So I think that answers the question. Yeah.
Okay. Is UU the vote connected with or working with any of the following? JF Bauer. I'm not sure if I can read that well.
Local, state, and national organizations.
Californians for, could you just say them, please? Oh, okay. Any other national, are you collaborating with any other national organizations in short? UU the vote.
We have, and we are. In each of the states, there are partnerships that are supporting our work. As I said, ours in Arizona is supported by Arizona for Abortion Access. I mentioned earlier that we have done work, and I hope we are still doing work with ACLU, League of Women Voters, and other local organizations. Our other national partnerships are the ones I mentioned earlier as well. Vote Forward, Reclaim Our Vote. It's an organization called Center for Common Ground. They do postcarding, and they're national. Is that answering your question? Do we work with national organizations? All right, just want to make sure I understood the question.
Any specific organizations? I don't know if you meant specific local, state, national organizations.
For specific to California? Yeah. Not that I'm aware of. Honestly, our work in California is outreach work. So That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it. We ought to be paying, I'm paying more attention to my local politics these days. It's turning out to be pretty interesting. So.
Here's a question on electoral policy and reform. Australia requires its citizens to vote. It requires them. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
What could the USA learn from Australia?
I love this one because Australia is not the only one. Germany requires you to vote. You don't vote, you get fined. Yeah, I mean, you are going to have your voice heard whether you like it or not, or you're going to pay the fine. Could you get such a thing passed in this country? It's hard for me to imagine. My God, you couldn't get people to put on a mask during COVID. Right? So it's difficult for me to imagine that we could get something like that passed, which is a shame. It really is, because the logic of it is, to me, is impeccable. Make your voice heard. So if y'all know anybody in battleground states, this is the clarion call. When we say, what are the three things that you can do that have the most impact? Anybody? Vote, volunteer, donate. So here's the volunteer part. If you know anybody, if you have friends in battleground states, please reach out to them and make sure that they have a plan to vote and that their friends have a plan to vote. Okay. If they're interested at all in this work, I promise you there is a UU in their neighborhood that would love to have them. So.
Okay. UU, the vote is nonpartisan. You haven't mentioned any candidates that you're urging us to vote for. This question speaks to the uncommitted movement of which I was a part. That was people who were so put off by the genocide in Gaza that they did not want to vote in the primary for Biden. So I appreciate you mentioning Gaza and Palestine. I did that at the beginning of this meeting. How can we bring this issue of genocide to prioritize during this electoral season? My inclination is to vote third party. It's a comment. I'd like to offer my own feelings about that, if I may. So I'm definitely identifying with your comments. I feel like, as Cal put at the beginning of this, is an election that will reverberate for generations. And if Trump somehow wins this, it'll be a very bad thing for the country. So we just have to keep that in mind, I think.
It's not the greatest answer in the world, but here it is. If you vote third party, you just cast a vote for Donald Trump. That's what you've done. Make no mistake about it. Yeah. And I mentioned he who should not be named, but I mentioned that not in a partisan way, but in a values way. While we may be nonpartisan, and we don't talk about candidacies and we don't work with campaigns, we sure as heck do talk about our values. We talk about them to everybody who will listen to us. So I do understand, I'll call it the cognitive dissonance of voting in such a way that you would think would continue to support the ongoing conflict in Palestine and in Israel, which is, we all know, is horrendous. But it's not going to be solved by voting third party.
Is UU the vote partnering with any other religious denominations?
Not that I have interacted with. That's a great question for Vanessa, who is so plugged into the interfaith community. But our work at UU the Vote has been within our congregations throughout the country. Although, my God, I don't know anybody who wouldn't welcome that. So, all right, is that it? All right, yep.
Electoral work in California can focus on swing congressional districts. It's a comment.
It's absolutely true, especially in the southern part of the state. Get down into Bakersfield, you have some contested congressional seats. In fact, there's talk that the outcome of the congressional seats in Southern California could tip the balance. Oh, there's 10 in the chat. Isn't that what you're saying? I can just put these up if I want.
Cal, what do you think about lowering the voting age to 16 years?
What do I think about lowering the voting age to 16 years? I don't know. I really don't know. Then again, you know, I look at the younger generation and say, sorry, you know, for what we are leaving them in terms of what has happened to the planet, for what we are leaving them in what is the current state of our electoral system. And I do mean that when I look at him. I mean, I have a very good friend who's 24 years old, and it's like, sorry, you're going to have to fix this. Should I read these? Oh, anyone have? See if I've been a poll worker more than once. Thank you, Roger. Been a poll worker more than once. Excellent.
I think you might have addressed this already, but are you working with any women's organizations to determine issues and support for someone being nonpartisan?
Well, I'm pretty certain that Arizona for Abortion Access is primarily a women's organization. But I'm, you know, the organizations that I've been working with accept allies of every stripe. So I can't say that I work strictly with a women's organization other than the League of Women Voters, who even has male allies. So I don't know if that answered the question. That's the best I can do.
Good.
All right. Let's call the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Thank you very much, Sam Meyer. That's that initiative that I referred to earlier, that states can sign on to say, we will cast our electoral votes for the popular vote winner. Thank you, Sam. Lower voting house. Well, okay, that's all the questions that I've got here.
Okay.
Oh, one more? One more?
Could you, the vote, encourage high school students to get their parents to vote in a way to involve and activate young people?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of depression on
all right. Do I have time for a quick story?
Yeah.
This is a quick one. Just canvassing in Georgia. I'm walking along the street and I'm by myself, and I see these two young men who are clearly teenagers. And they're with an older gentleman. When I say older, I think he was maybe in his late 20s, 30s. And they were walking along. And, you know, these are Black folks, and I'm walking behind them, and they've got stuff in their hands, and I catch up to them. And it turns out they're actually canvassing for Raphael Warnock. This is partisan canvassing. And we get into a conversation. These two young men are clearly doing this as kind of a class project or some project around community service. And the older gentleman with them was their mentor and their leader. And the one young kid, 15, 16, he goes, you know, y'all show up here, people that look like you show up here every 2 to 4 years. We have these conversations and you go away and take a look at this neighborhood. This hasn't changed. So you tell me what I'm doing here. And I said, well, the first thing you're doing is asking one of the best questions you possibly could. So let's start with that. And 2, we need to keep our focus on how this system works, is that there's only so much can be done unless and until we capture majorities in our various houses or various legislative branches, right? We already got the Supreme Court that is a challenge, but telling you, you don't capture the House, you don't capture the Senate, we're not going to be able to do anything for people of color. We're not going to be able to do anything and really, truly protect LGBTQ rights. So the down ballot races count. And we just went on to have this conversation, and he was just getting into it and challenging me, and I loved it. And finally we stopped, and he looked over at the older guy. He says, "How'd I do?" I said, "Man, you did great." Okay.
I'm sure you've already covered this, but what are the chances of eventually eliminating or coming in with something instead of the electoral college?
Well, yeah, we did talk about that a little bit. I think the best thing I've heard so far is the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. That's where the states, again, are committing their electoral college votes to the popular vote winner. Anything else is going to require a constitutional amendment. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's some really good arguments of that sounds tempting until you do it. And then the box is open. I don't know if does that answer the question? All right. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact.
How many states have ratified that so far?
A
A
few.
few,
I knew you were
right?
going to ask that. No,
About 10.
I think there's more than 10.
Yeah.
There could be as many as 15, or maybe Sam, if you're near a computer, you could tell us.
It'd be great if some of those small redder states would do it.
Well, again, the tipper point is they're looking for states that equal 270 electoral votes, no matter where they come from. You know, I don't think you're going to get South Carolina to sign up. So that's what they're working on.
Okay, we want to thank you, Cal, for doing God's work, as Art put it. And
Thank you.
we'll all be writing letters, won't we? We're going to get involved and do this. Some of us might even go to Arizona and canvass. I see a few faces that were not here at the beginning, so I just want to repeat a couple of the most important announcements. And so one is come back next Sunday. We'll have Tim Redmond here talking about also similar issues, a little bit more local focus. And this Thursday, Art is at the back of the room. He's got flyers about all the details about this, but in this room, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. this Thursday, the mayoral candidates for San Francisco and for 3 of the supervisor districts will be here taking questions, especially relevant to seniors and people with disabilities. So that should be a really great meeting. And then finally, I want to mention that in the service coming up in a few minutes here, they have the annual ingathering of the waters. And some of us are going to be registering our concern for Gaza by taking an empty cup to this dais. And I have mine here with the watermelon on it, and it says empty cup to symbolize our concern for the intentional destruction of the water systems in Gaza. So thank you very much. If you can do that, it would be great. And we'll see you next Sunday.
Thank you.